Scrutiny committee meeting. Do remember, everybody, that the session is being recorded. So we will get underway, we'll make way. Item 1, the minutes of the last meeting, which you should all have in your packs. Members, can I get your approval to accept those as a true record? Is anybody opposed to that? Lovely, thank you, everybody. There we go. So we can move on to item 2, apologies.
I've received apologies from councillors Adams, Benton, Davis, Jackson, Lawrence, Sadler, Sutton and Cope.
Lovely, thank you very much. Leader also tells me Councillor Reid. Oh, of course, not on the committee. And apologies, Carol, by the way, I was looking in the wrong place when I asked for the apologies. So my own apologies for that, if that makes sense. So we can move on to item 3 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations? Can't see anybody signalling any declarations. None have been made in advance of the meeting. So we move on to item 4, which is the Integrated Performance Management Report for Q2. Could I call on the Leader of the Council, Councillor Lees, to introduce this item?
Thank you, Dan. Good evening, members. I'd like to present the Integrated Performance Management Report. The report provides a combined update as of the 30th of September 22, Q2 of the 22-23 on performance, finance and risk. Q2 of the 22-23 has continued to see financial services challenges, where of the 23 council planning targets, 17 are green, 3 amber and 2 red. But as members will note that despite ongoing external challenges, the council continues to perform well against the council plan priorities. I'll ask the Corporate Director, Infrastructure and Business Growth to present the report. Over to you, Annette.
Thank you, Councillor Lees, and good evening, members. This is a different IPM report from what you've been used to. And Pete would ordinarily present this report, but as he's on leave, you've got me, and I'm sure that John, who sat behind me, will be able to answer any finance questions if they arise. What this report does, though, is it still gives you all the raw data and highlights red, amber and green items as Councillor Lees has set out. But it does try to present a more holistic picture across performance of our services and their wider implications. So what I plan to do this evening is to highlight some key items, but in a more integrated way than previously. You'll be pleased to see, members, that the overall position at Q2 is positive and the headlines are certainly reassuring. And as Councillor Lees has pointed out, we've got 17 greens across the board. And overall, in terms of finance, both revenue and capital budgets are reassuringly showing as green. We've got 3 ambers and only 2 reds on the scorecard, all of which are being carefully monitored. So sticking with finance for a moment, we have a 16.1 million forecast outturn against a 16.23 million revenue budget and 1.5 million capital spend to date against a 22 million capital budget, so all favourable. Despite challenges, the forecast is a minor net favourable balance, and that's not to say there are not pressures, and these are driven largely by inflation and the challenges of the cost of living. In terms of giving you confidence on those items flagging red at this stage, I'll run through those now for you. So leisure service memberships levels and cost versus income target is flagging red on the scorecard. And this is largely impacted by the refurbishment works. But the team are keeping a close eye on this, and despite efforts to increase membership levels, it is looking unlikely that the 100% target will be met at year end due to the impact largely of the refurbishments, but also post-COVID. Commercial property income on the finance sheet is showing as red, although the majority of our enterprise estates continue to be well let. This particularly is a result of 2 vacancies and the issues caused by the fire in one of our units. We are closely monitoring the situation in relation to the impact of wider economic concerns, but there is not, as yet, any significant evidence which would lead us to consider that this is going to be a longer-term issue of concern. But of course, the benefit of this integrated performance management report is to allow us to keep these items under review on a regular basis and report them to you in this way. So in terms of items flagging amber, these are housing benefits claims. These are taking longer to process due to significant work demands and sickness absence being higher than targets due to longer term absence, although there is no demonstrated impact on performance in relation to the sickness. So overall, you'll be pleased to see that planning income is performing well at Q2, and with the establishment of appropriate reserves and effective and timely borrowing taken as rates were at record low rates, has meant there is a 0.1 million improvement against the overall budget. Overall, at this point, I think it's important to look at the number of achievements across the services which can be pictorially evidenced. I'll pick out a few of those highlights now, and Lorraine is about to share them on the screen, hopefully. Apologies, members, we'll get there in a moment. There we go, that's right. Okay, we get there in the end. So from July to September, we collected over 10,000 tonnes of waste and emptied over 850,000 bins, and almost half of that was recycled, composted or reused. The planning enforcement team have also closed 111 cases this quarter, and we know that's a point that's really close to a number of members' hearts, and that's due to a really major push on case management that we've employed in the last couple of months. But they've also logged a new 65 new cases this quarter as well. So you can see that whilst we're getting through them and closing them, new cases are arising all the time. Fly tipping was down 11% last quarter, and by September, over £4,000 have been distributed to over 20 community groups engaged in climate change initiatives. And at the end of September, over 35,000, nearly 35,500 council tax energy rebates were issued, totalling over 5.3 million in monetary terms. And the list goes on. There are many others that we could highlight, but there's just a snapshot of a number of those key stats that we'd like to bring to you in this format. So, members, in conclusion, the performance picture that we can present at the end of Q2 is a positive one, and with plans in place to continually manage performance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report, Annette. Members, I think this is your opportunity to ask questions. Would anybody like to ask questions? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several things, really. First of all, about the green waste. The green waste, I notice, is not breaking even at the moment. We were looking at 69.3% for it, and it's only at 69. I'm wondering at what point and what number we need to get to in order to have that at break even. I'm also concerned that we're not reusing or recycling as much as we used to do. Clearly, that's a change of provider for looking at the recycling. We're only recycling 47.4%. Personally, I very much welcome a comment about an extra collection for glass and plastic, if necessary, separately, because I believe most people now have got used to the paper collection, and I think it would be advantageous to us to be able to recycle more of our paper, of our plastic and glass separately, so that we could actually earn more money from it. Those are my first two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Jackie, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Councillor Allen, for those questions. In terms of the green waste not breaking even, from the first year, we obviously had such a positive response from the community. The target was based on, in fact, the first year. So, in fact, we are achieving far higher than we ever originally had anticipated, but obviously the budget is now reflective of the performance. One of the things is that target is also based on, it could be by June next year, because the people do continue to still, and at the moment we are, I think it's some sort of about 30,000 down on against the target, but there are still people. Even the last week we've seen a few people more sign up, so we will continue to push for people to sign up to that one. In relation to the recycling, it's always going to be a challenge in terms of whatever we do now, it is about the margins. It's very difficult to increase by even a percentage, but it is something that the team strive to do. In terms of actually changing any of the collections, as you're aware, we are obviously in contract, and to actually change any collection really in terms of separating out plastic and glass, which would possibly mean that we'd have to do extra rounds. There is such a financial burden associated with doing that. I think one of the things that we've got to do is build all of this into when we look to renew the contract. So it will be something that will absolutely be evaluated about when we recontract for April 25, which in fact we'll be looking at back end of next year. These are the sorts of things where we'll be definitely coming to members to get your views on how we can potentially change the service and improve the service. But I think to do it at this stage is potentially, unfortunately, it's the financial burden that we'd probably have with making any direct changes to the service.
Thank you, Jackie, for that response. Councillor Allen, does that answer your questions? You've got a follow-up?
Can I make a very small comment about this, please?
Yeah.
And that's to say, if there was any indication that the charge was going to be raised because we weren't breaking even with the service, I think that would be very poorly received. I have got other questions, but I'm sure other members have too.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I'm sure you'll have a chance to come back a bit later on. Jackie, anything to add on that, or no?
Sorry, just in terms of there was no intention to raise any charges at all.
Lovely, thank you, Jackie. Next we have Councillor Ewart. Councillor Ewart.
I appear to be lit up and online, as it were. I'm actually following up on Councillor Allen's comments, and it's just a couple of things that occur to me in response to the questions that she asked. And the first of these is a bit of a terminological thing. We have to be very cautious with that sort of thing. I do recollect very clearly when this council chamber was the other way around, and we had Councillor Mary Bond with us, now sadly departed. And the terminology she used in reference to recycling was to say that a certain proportion or mass or whatever of waste had been sent to recycling, which is actually some distance adrift of actually being recycled. And I'm just wondering whether or not the discrepancy between former figures and the current numbers that we're looking at and were raised by Councillor Allen could be a function of the terminology we use. Maybe I'm just being a bit picky, but that was my thought. The other thing is, it did occur to me, in terms of plastics and glass, there's another component in the waste stream, which is ferrous
and non-ferrous metals. That's to say food cans and beverage cans, broadly speaking. And the metals are extremely recyclable. Aluminium, for example, is a very recyclable material. And if we're going to go multi-stream, which is the kind of direction of travel I thought that you were talking about, Councillor Allen, then I think we should also take account of the ferrous and non-ferrous metals. I don't know how easy it is in the plastics, glass from the ferrous and non. The ferrous metals are easy, you just need a magnet. The non-ferrous, the aluminiums, are a wee bit more tricky. I just wonder what might be said very much about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for your questions. Jackie?
Thank you very much. In terms of obviously what members will be aware of is we're still awaiting the outcome of the Environmental Act, which will give us some direction ultimately about separation of items, and we will need to understand what that is because that will be a government directive for us. So in one respect, I think it's something we really do need to know what the government's future direction would be. In terms of actually, there is always a balance to be struck about how many containers that residents have as well, and I know members have found that quite a challenge, particularly this year. So I think that's one of the factors. There's a balance between doing the right thing, which is absolutely the right thing to do, but also it's the impact on our residents, and certainly consultation around all of those changes is something that we'd be very keen to do, certainly with members in our communities before we introduce any change. But some of it will be based on what the environmental bill in fact it's an act now, actually stipulates for us.
Can I just ask again about this question of how we measure the amount of material that gets recycled? How is that arrived at?
Oh, Jackie.
In terms of, there hasn't been any change in terms of, again, it's very strict in terms of how it's actually accounted for, because we have to actually supply those figures to DEFRA, and it's actually based on the recycling plant they actually measure the tonnage and everything that's recycled. Obviously there is payback for certain materials as well, so it is all calculated, and the team actually have to do quite a lot of work on that, and it's obviously built into the county work as well because of them being the disposal agents.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor, a further clarification.
Not exactly that. It's just that you see, not everything that goes into a recycling plant, the nature of things will actually be recycled. I'm not quite sure whether they measure the weight coming in, the weight of actually recycled material going out. I know I'm being pedantic, but it does have some significance.
I think it is an interesting point. It'd be interesting to know whether there are two sets of figures and versus what we get from the end, the end receiver. Jackie.
I would probably propose, I'm not the expert on this, I'm more than happy we'll get a note out to members to clarify that point.
Lovely. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Councillor Ewart, for your questions. Members, anybody else wish to ask any questions? Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. Regarding the income from leisure services, we seem surprised that there's a 139k loss from swim income arising from the refurbishment at Humber and Cheslin Hay. Well, surely they were programmed. So why are we surprised that there's no income, or I got it wrong?
Thank you, Councillor Steele, for your question there. Jackie, are you able to shine a light on that?
Apologies. It's not that we're surprised. I think it was the fact that when we the budget was set so far in advance, we weren't able to programme in the timing of when those closures were, because we hadn't entered into those contracts. Because we've actually now entered into those contracts, quite clearly we were well aware that we would see a dip in that actual income as a result of it. So it's not actually a surprise to us. What we were hoping is, though, that we could have actually increased possibly more the memberships which would have helped to offset some of that. So it is about the fact that you put the picture together, but it isn't something that's a surprise to us.
Lovely. Thank you, Jackie. Councillor Steele, are you happy with that answer?
I'll have to be, won't I? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Oh, it was further question. Go on.
Regarding climate change, what was the point of declaring a climate emergency when the services, and particularly waste collection and recycling, seem to be based on margins, i.e. profit? If everybody tackle climate emergency with profit in mind, I don't think it's going to get very far, is it? That's just a...
Thank you for the point, Councillor Steele. Members, any other questions? Councillor Allen?
Thank you. Could I have an assurance, please, about the leisure services that the swimming pools will stay open? I notice other authorities are struggling to cope with the bills associated with their swimming pools. I'm already being asked whether they intend, after the refurbishment, to reopen them. So could I have some reassurance about that, please? And is there an update about this situation at the Bagridge Country Park, where we've lost 10k due to the car park not being completed? Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Councillor Allen. Jackie, come back on the swimming pools. I know see it an awful lot in the media at the minute about swimming pools.
One of the things that we've obviously having to build into the budget is the extra costs for heating and things. But at the moment, there is absolutely no plans at all to do anything, especially because we are investing in those facilities. The intention is to actually keep them open. And we do know that the swimming is very, very important to our young people in particular.
Thank you very much for that response. Who's going to field the question about the Bagridge? Oh, thank you, Lorraine.
So with respect to the Bagridge car park, we are currently in ongoing discussions with Barratt Homes / David Wilson Homes regarding transferring that land to the District Council to enable us to take forward the car parking order. However, we are in some difficult negotiations with them at the moment. We're not agreed on that transfer at the moment, so those discussions are ongoing. It was raised by Cabinet today. We will be pushing forward on that to try and get that resolved as soon as possible.
Lovely. Thank you, Lorraine, for that explanation. Members, any other questions? Oh, Councillor Allen, you want to come back on that?
Not to come back to ask another question, please, about the benefits situation. We know we're going to employ 2 extra people to look at benefits and welfare for people. I'm wondering myself now if that's going to be enough. And is there any slack in the budget if we are required to have extra staffing? I'm saying that because the levels of deprivation are really becoming very apparent in our communities. And people are extremely anxious, particularly because they can't always access the Citizens Advice Service either when they're deeply in debt. Gary's nodding at me. So I think we're hearing these comments from people in our communities, and I'm thinking that if there is a big demand on this service, can we meet it?
Thank you, Councillor Allen, for that question. Elaine, you're going to come in and field this one?
Yes, you're quite right. We're under a lot of pressure, and residents in our communities are under a lot of pressure financially, and we're certainly seeing an uptake in benefit claims and contact around welfare support. The 2 additional benefit officers will allow us to meet that current demand, but we're also putting in provision to flex that up should the situation change. We have a number of options available to us. So we are working with third-party contractors to provide additional support to process benefits that we can step up and down should the needs arise. And we are also working closely with other partners, including Citizens Advice, around our welfare support. We have a welfare support team at the council, so if anybody is struggling around budgeting or who needs debt advice, we can directly refer people through to that service, and we also provide budgeting advice within the team as well.
Lovely, thank you, Elaine. Councillor Allen, you wanted to clarify that or come
Just a
back on
brief
that?
comeback, please, because I noticed that it has been taking 20 days and not 15, which is what our target is, to provide that advice to people. And I think, is it envisaged that when these 2 new posts are filled, that we'll be able to reduce that down to the 15 days again?
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Elaine, do you want to come?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, the aim is to bring it down to 15 days. The 22 days is the current average nationally at the moment. So we're not way above that, but we have been higher than that in recent months. We've managed to bring it back down to 22, and we certainly hope to bring it back down to the 15. But as I say, we've got that flexibility, and it depends, you know, what else happens.
Lovely, thank you, Elaine. Members, any other questions? Councillor Steele.
Chairman, I've just spotted another one. Under recycling, on page 20, we've got a statement. Identified pressures include an 80k pressure due to reduction in dry credit volumes as per the MRF contract. Is this due to paper and the cardboard being soaking wet? Because I've noticed over the last 2 or 3 collections, because people are putting the bags out the night before a Monday collection in our area, and it's poured with rain, the bags are more than half open because they don't fit very well. Is that what this pressure is? Because the contents aren't kept dry. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Steele. Jackie, do you want to just clarify on that one, please?
I don't believe that's the reason. But again, for clarity, I will get that in the note to go to members, but I don't believe that is the case, but I will just confirm that.
Lovely, thank you, Jackie. Members, any other questions? Cannot see anybody indicating, in which case we'll move on. We now have item 5 on our agenda. It is the Local Government Association Peer Challenge of South Staffordshire Council. So if I could hand over to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Lees, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Dan. As members will be aware, the Council took part in an LGA peer review at the start of October, and the initial feedback was excellent, with the peer team recognising the in-depth strength the Council has. Particularly pleasing was the recognition of how we work internally and relationships between officers and officers to members, which strongly contributes to the Council's ensuing we can continue to prosper as a Council. I will now pass over to the Chief Executive to take you through the report. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Good evening, members. Again, I think it's fair to say part of the Council's continuous learning ethos is just taking a step back from the day-to-day functions of the Council and the pace of delivery, so we can review, reflect not only how we're performing as a Council, but make sure we're continually shaping how we move services forward to support our communities in their widest sense. I quite often refer to how complex an organisation we are with 24 different services. We've got our commercial offer and our wider community leadership role, which is absolutely essential as a district council, all of which has just been highlighted in the report and the presentation by Annette on our overall performance over the last 6 months. And although that's absolutely critical to do, it's important we look at other mechanisms to take stock and challenge how we're performing as a council beyond the traditional methods. And the LGA peer review is an excellent mechanism to do just that, where a team of experienced local government peers are invited into the council to check and challenge how we're performing against a number of nationally set standards of assessment And these include how we organise the council as a whole, our understanding of the wider challenges facing the district, our governance arrangements, our financial planning, and importantly, really important, our capacity for continuous improvement. In addition to those 5 assessment areas, we asked the peer team to challenge how we can build on the already healthy culture of the council. And as Councillor Lees has just pointed out, the LGA peer team visited us in October, where they were with us for just under 3 days. They interviewed over 100 different individuals from a wide spectrum of areas, including our own staff, elected members, business partners, the voluntary sectors and other local authorities from across the region. So as I said, a broad spectrum of people to really test and challenge us against the standards of assessment. And again, as Councillor Lees has pointed out, the outcome was very positive indeed, with its peer team very complimentary of how we organise and operate as a council. And like any external review, there's always areas we can take forward to further enhance what we're doing as a council. And although we're still to receive the final report, we've had the draft one from the peer team and the initial overview. A number of recommendations were highlighted by the peer team, which we know will feature in the end final report. And what is pleasing to note that the peer team, having sort of fed back, feel there's absolutely no red flags that we need to be concerned about. Overall, the strategic focus is there as a council, the operational delivery is in place, and it's more about the polishing, and that's using their words, not ours, and working through the margins so we can get to that next level. We know things aren't perfect. We can always improve, and there will always be blips, but it's how we respond as a council. So it's about taking us from a very good council to an excellent one. So, for example, we're currently looking at how we can get that consistency throughout the organisation. And we're looking at how we can review our service standards post COVID, because things have changed, and we've already picked up leisure this evening as an example. So the peer team identified 8 draft recommendations for us to consider, which the corporate leadership team have initially gone through and made some early observations, and these are set out in Appendix 2 of the report. And once the final report is received, we'll come back with a more detailed action plan. However, in the meantime, we'd like to take this evening to get your input as members against the 8 recommendations identified. So Jackie Smith will now take you through each of the 8 recommendations just to gain your initial sort of observations, comments and thoughts. Jackie.
Apologies, members, it's my voice you're going to hear again for a little while. What I'm going to do is just go through the recommendation and our initial thoughts against that, pause against each one, and obviously take any comments and feedback from members. So the first recommendation we're anticipating is about maintaining the focus that was set out in the evolution programme. So our response to that at this stage and to share with members is to give clarity of direction. We have launched a service evolution programme, and that's to support the ambition to reshape and design and deliver our service functions to support and engage our communities. And the programme very particularly sets out the how, the what and the when. So our response is very much on the basis of we want to maintain that focus on the evolution programme. ensure that that is rolled out across the organisation, and that's providing that clarity of the priorities within the programme and focus particularly on delivering strategic work programmes for the next 12 months. And a good example of that would be our workforce development strategy, where we're obviously looking at the talent and the recruitment and retention of employees. I'll pause there, Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions or comments on that point.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you for that. I must say, before we go to questions, I was interviewed myself as part of this process, which I found distinctly interesting. Speaking as a teacher and, of course, as quite a new committee chairman, I found it quite interesting being in the position of almost sort of having your homework marked. It was quite, yeah, it was quite a sort of almost out-of-body experience, I think. Members, any questions so far? No questions. Can't see anybody signalling. Okay, thank you. Jackie, you want to move on to the next one?
Recommendation number 2 then is to develop a consistent approach to service standards, mapping customer journeys and measuring evidence satisfaction to support further improvement. Members will be acutely aware that obviously post-COVID, we obviously do want to take that opportunity to do a little bit of a reset, to look at our service standards to make sure they're reflective of still how we should be doing things. Really good example would be is in terms of the community, our residents engage with us on a number of levels in terms of how they might interact with us. It's about setting some of those standards rather than it's the traditional 10 days response to a letter. Actually, people email us. There's so many different ways. It's about setting some of those standards. The only thing that we would have gone back to, and we'll go back to the peer review on, is that we would like just a slight tweak to the wording on that recommendation, just in terms of its develop a consistent approach, and it's about setting service standards, because we do have service standards, but it's actually about a consistent approach to actually setting them. Currently, our assistant directors have been tasked to work with their teams to review and set some the service standards pertinent to their work areas. In relation to the other part of that recommendation for the mapping of the customer journey, measuring evidence and satisfaction, again, we already have a review in place looking at that customer feedback policy, analysis of our customer satisfaction, the data and collection, and very much using that data and intelligence to feed into services and that customer experience review as well. Happy to.
Thank you, Jackie. Members, any questions on this item? Oh, wow, lots signalling. We'll start with Councillor Spencer.
Chairman, thank you for that. I think what was interesting there about trying to ensure that consistency is that a consistency of service that we offer as a council, or is there also a need to have some sort of national consistency about how all local authorities, and leading perhaps on from that, are there any plans or processes around sort of evidence-based practice, best practice that we might be able to learn from others? And the other point I would also make is sometimes when it comes to customer feedback, and I think maybe sadly this council as well, that's not a criticism, I think all councils do, the amount of things that we measure that customer feedback is quite limited, isn't it? Again, I think of an issue close to my heart around crime and disorder, and we used to base everything on whether people feel safe during the day and feel safe during the hours of darkness. I just personally think those are far too broad a measure, and if we are serious about improving service in various areas, then I just wonder whether or what the process is to better understand that customer feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Jackie, do you want to respond to that?
Okay, a number of points, really valuable points points for us to consider. Consistency is about actually at a local level, but actually one of the things that we will always look at, it's really interesting when you talk about the evidence of best practice potentially of what others are doing, and in fact when we look at the last recommendation, that is very much what the peer are recommending, that actually we've got a really good story to tell about a lot of what we do and whether or not that should be more shared across the local government family. And that's certainly something we would want to do with the local government association. And just as a potential side issue for members, one of the things this council supports me to do is actually go and be a peer reviewer in other authorities. And that again is where that exchange and learning happens in terms of us actually reaching out. And I think we're very strong as a council in terms of actually learning from others, but I think we've equally got a good story to tell as well. I think you make a really good point in terms of the breadth of some of the service standards as to whether they've got a true meaning. And certainly the crime one is a little bit of a blunt instrument in some respects because there's so many things that influence that. And that's what the work the assistant directors are actually looking to do, is actually look at those, but actually look at it through the community lens. So it's not looking at it as a council about what we think is worth measuring. It's actually looking at it from that community lens and what's important to our communities. And certainly, again, one of the things we're very keen to do is a lot more of those SNAP surveys to actually test that out and actually looking at things like community panels where we can actually engage with our communities and actually get them to help shape and influence the way we do things.
Lovely, thank you for that, Jackie. Happy with that, Councillor Spencer? Like
Yes, thank you. That sounds really reassuring. Thank you, Jackie. Chair.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Spencer. I now have Councillor Barrow, and then we'll go to Councillor Allen. Councillor Barrow.
Thank you, Chair. I think we provide an excellent service here in the council. We have no problems with that. The feedback I get from people is, how do you get into the council to start with? How do you speak to people? And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have. I have no end of people say to me, I've been on the phone, I can't get an answer. I get pushed from here to there. I think until we get the service of how they get into us sorted out, our reputation goes down the pan. And it's so sad, really, because once they do get in, they get an excellent service. But I don't think we've got the telephone service sorted out efficiently enough yet. And I think we need to concentrate on that more. Is that something we're looking at?
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Barrow, for your comments there. Jackie, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're all very aware that during the peak period when we were rolling out the blue bag service, the annual permits for the chargeable garden waste and the energy, the customer service times were very long waits. I still have the statistics daily to confirm what our performance is, and I can say that we are now back to business as usual in terms of over 92 to 98% of calls are answered, and the average time is between 3 to 5 minutes. We're even pushing some of that. There are still, and it's fair to say, the odd occasion where in fact it is a slightly longer wait, but that is one person on average out of 1,002 people. Still something that we want to work on, and we are looking at a review to make sure that actually it is fit for purpose in terms of how we deliver that telephone contact.
Thank you, Jackie. And I think the point you ended on there, sort of reviewing this is really important. Councillor Barrow, are you satisfied with that? Do you want to come back? Thank you, Councillor Barrow. Councillor Allen, you're next.
Thank you. I wonder if it's possible when we're redesigning the website and thinking about the way in which people respond. For many organisations now, at the close of a conversation or at the close of an email, I'm asked, am I satisfied with the service? Rating it in a star. It's a quick way of taking a snapshot. I'd be very interested to have that happening both with the website, with phone calls and with emails, so that we have some sort of straw poll, if you like, of whether people are satisfied with the answers that they get and whether they are satisfied with the quality of the call sometimes. Some people with their mobiles are struggling to access or reception sometimes. And I think that would really help us have a very brief overview.
Thank you for your points there, Councillor Allen. Jackie, you'd like to respond?
Certainly, that's something I will feed back to the team who are actually looking at the development of the website to see if that is a function that they can build into it. But I'll certainly take that back to the team.
Lovely, thank you, Jackie. Councillor Burnett next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to endorse exactly what echo what Councillor Barrow has said. A lot of people, when I'm out and about, stop me and they'll say, "I'm sure the council works really well, but we really don't know enough about the people that we need to speak to get us our problems sorted." We were speaking about earlier about possibly getting residents into a group to try and work. Them to say how they would like to see how the services are rated, for them to give their input so that we've got both sides, because it really does come up time and time again that when things get done, they're great, but it's actually getting in there, getting the right person on time to do the job. That seems to be the problem. But when it is done, it's usually done very well indeed.
Thank you for the comments there, Councillor Burnett. I think that just sort of really builds on what Councillor Barrow was asking earlier on. Jackie, do you want to respond to that? Is there anything you want to add?
For me, it's absolutely what we take on board and we'll be building into the review.
Lovely, thank you, Jackie. Members, anybody else with any questions at this stage? No, thank you, in which case we'll move on.
The next recommendation is develop and implement an operational service level dashboard to help ensure consistency and quality of service. And also there was a suggestion of considering investment in a software-based system. In terms of, we had already developed as a corporate leadership team a dashboard that we as a corporate leadership team on a monthly basis review, and we don't see that as a dashboard that's static. It's in fact one that is flexible, and it's based again on some of the customer feedback that we have and where we know, for instance, through the integrated performance management report that we talked about earlier, it's whether or not there are issues that we want to flag up. So we again would very much support that recommendation, but I think it's interesting that word consistency again features, and it's something that we're very focused on. In terms of actually investing in any software, in fact, Pete Shakespeare, who looks after this side of it, actually believes we've already got an existing software-based system that we could actually use, and is evaluating that at the moment. So we don't actually necessarily see the need for an investment. We in fact might be able to utilise an existing system to develop that further.
Lovely, thank you, Jackie. Bearing in mind this is 3 of 8, is that correct? 3 of 8. Members, any questions on this item? No, okay, Jackie, move on.
The fourth one was in relation to capacity for project delivery and ensuring that we're in a position to be able to maintain the delivery of business as usual, as well as some of the bigger projects that we do. Again, as a corporate leadership team, we regularly review capacity across the teams, and we also look at that in terms of projects. Our view is that we believe that due to the culture of the organisation, actually what works best is that the projects that use the existing teams are best placed to actually deliver on the outcomes and the changes. And they are actually about, quite often, most of our projects are cross-organisational. They're not just about the service team. It may well be there's finance, there's legal, human resources. There are different people that actually make up that team to take that project forward. And certainly one of the things we will always do is if we require that additional capacity. We've got some good examples where we've adopted this approach. So, for instance, we've brought in resources around our commercial ventures, project management, and we brought in some resources around equality. So we see that as something where it's actually evaluating each project and what resources are required, rather than adopting a project team per se approach. But what we do have is a project tool that we use to actually deliver on projects.
Lovely, thank you, Jackie. Members, any questions? No questions on that. We'll move on to number 5.
Number 5 is about the customer experience programme and the website project. And I think I won't dwell on that one because it's something we've already touched on in terms of very much going back to recommendation number 2. It is, as members know, it's the business transformation programme in particular that we've got, which is a 2-year programme, and council has approved 450 investment to actually support and deliver on that one.
Lovely. Thank you, Jackie. Members, any questions? No signalling. Okay, number 6, Jackie. We're motoring there.
Again, the recommendation is to ensure a commercial approach is taken across the range of business as usual services, and that was particularly focused on contract management and income recovery. We do maximise our commercial approach through various channels and our procurement streamlining. We have a new debt management policy in place, that how we manage our suppliers, and basically looking at the capacity in both finance and commercial to improve our debtors management and income recovery systems. We do take a commercial approach, and through our resource prioritisation and planning, we are looking at particularly fees and charges to make sure that, again, the approach that's taken is consistent with that commercial agenda, but equally being sensitive to that balance, which is something I think we always want to make sure we do.
Lovely. Thank you, Jackie. Members, any questions? Councillor Allen.
Just want to ask briefly about the audit and risk, because many of these challenges that we are facing are subject to certain amounts of risk depending on the environment we're operating in and the financial structures at the time and the ever-changing government directives and so forth. Is it practical or realistic to have the Audit and Risk Committee or a separate function of the Cabinet to study this more thoroughly and in more depth in association with these profiling that's needed and the accountability that's required for this organisation?
Thank you, Councillor Allen, for your question. Jackie, would you like to respond?
Sorry, Councillor Ryan, could I clarify, is that in relation specifically to this particular item or the peer review? Are you thinking?
Across the peer review, there are a number of items where I see audit and risk being an item that is particularly being flagged. There's a flag about the timescale for the website. There's a flag about the commercial approach here. There's a flag about the capital schemes needing to be profiled. And I would imagine these are all functions of the Audit and Risk Committee. Is it more practical to have that committee meeting more often in order to review these? Or is this a particular function that the Cabinet would wish to take up?
Oh, sorry, Lorraine.
I'm sorry. Okay. So Councillor Allen, as you will be aware, we try and split that function up so it is more manageable. So we have an asset scrutiny panel. So for those commercial decisions, the scrutiny process is that asset scrutiny panel. So rather than audit and risk holding the reins on that one, the check and balance is the asset scrutiny panel. So anything in the commercial world goes through that for scrutiny before it's being issued as a leader decision. So there's a separate process for that commercial aspect of things. But absolutely, the Audit and Risk Committee holds mantle overall on the risk profile of the organisation. But we do report regularly as well to informal Cabinet, so Cabinet have eyes on that as well. So there is the balance across the Cabinet side of things and the committee side of things.
Lovely. Thank you, Lorraine, for that explanation. Councillor Allen, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, just briefly, just to say the number of red items what we're looking at this evening, and that's the reason I'm asking this question, because some of them are asset and scrutiny and some of them are normally into audit and risk. And I'm wondering whether the overlap between those two committees is something that somebody somewhere, I'm assuming in the Cabinet, is looking at, so that I'm very pleased with the quality of the reports that we're receiving. And I should say Mr. Shakespeare's report was exceptional. And I think it's something which all large organisations with budgets are having to do more regularly, scrutinise their audit and risk in view of the changing situations we're continually faced with.
Thank you, Councillor Allen, for that point. I do take it. Chief Executive, Mr Hayward.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Allen, for that. I think at the end of the day, we've got a good balance across the board in terms of how we review risk, how we manage risk, and I think it's been demonstrated this evening. So there's certainly there's no plans to change it. It is, as the report identified, this is about the margins. This is about taking us to the next level. The infrastructure we've got in place now is very strong, and it is about tweaking things. And we're continually reviewing how we do things, what we do, and we'll do that. But we're not talking about any fundamental changes here.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave, for that explanation there. Members, any other questions? Councillor Ewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little observation. I unfortunately have managed to lose the Sims on my computer, so I can't quote verbatim from the peer review report. But on page 66 of the pack, for those of you who have access to such, there is a specific, it's interesting terminology, strengths and considerations are the terms they use. And one of the considerations on page 66 is indeed that the Audit and Risk Committee should be, I forget the terminology used, but strengthened would be perhaps a summary word on that.
Thank you, Councillor Ewart. Dave, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, just to pick up on that specific point, that is something that is actually happening, and the corporate director for finance and resource is discussing with the chairman of the risk and audit group to do that. So it's in place. It's the process is there.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you, Councillor Ewart. I think that's nice and simple. Members, any other questions at this stage? No one's indicating. Jackie, I think we're on number 7 now.
Oh, members will be pleased to know we're actually on number 8. So the last of the recommendations is capital scheme is ensuring that profile is over the period of the MTFS to ensure accountability for delivery. And the simple answer to that is it actually was something that Pete had picked up and was planning on doing anyway. So it's actually in the work programme for Pete to do that.
Lovely, thank you, Jackie. I obviously wanted to drag that out a little bit longer, didn't I? Members, any questions? Councillor Steele.
Number 8's over the page on my card copy. There's another one, isn't there? Yeah.
Go on, Jack.
You're absolutely right. I was again keen to not keep members longer than necessary. This refers back to the point Councillor Spencer made, where in fact they are saying we've got a good story to tell and we should be in fact sharing that across the local government family. And again, one of the things we would say to that is we would absolutely welcome that opportunity. It's something we naturally do, but this is about possibly putting that on a different footing, but we would want to do that in conjunction with the local government association. Apologies.
Lovely, thank you, Jackie. Members, any questions? Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. Lots of IT references about, well, don't really understand them, mapping customer journeys, implement an operational service level dashboard. Obviously, it seems all IT based. So my question is, how do we collect the info and data we collect from residents who don't contact us through the website or through the internet? Because believe it or not, there's quite a few people who need help and assistance and they haven't got a computer. So I'd like an answer on that one, please.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Dave, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We're extremely very mindful that not everybody has access to IT equipment, etc. But that, for me, is where we put a number of the other mechanisms in place, and you as members are at the heart of the community and are in an excellent position to feedback, work with officers and work with the local community to put things in place. We're also very mindful in terms of, yes, we're pushing forward on the digital agenda, but it's already been picked up by Councillor Burnett this evening and one or two other members that community focus is absolutely critical. So Jackie picked up the first recommendation in here about the evolution programme. The evolution programme, part of that, there's a number of strands. One of the important strands is how we engage differently with our communities going forward. And one of the tasks that we've identified is looking at services who have a high volume, which is a high volume service to our customers, and then actually going out within the community to have those conversations a bit differently to how we've done it in the past. But I can't reiterate enough how important it is, and we always say that members are central and focused to this this position, and it's important that we continue to push your role forward and make sure that we are liaising with the community through yourselves.
Thank you, Dave, for that response. Members, any other questions? Nobody's indicating. Dave, did you want to just do a bit of a wrap up on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Really useful. Thank you, members. It was just to give you that, as I said, initial oversight of the P report. Very positive, but there are a number of things that, as part of our continuous improvement programme, we want to move forward on. And once we've received the final report and it's been signed up, we'll circulate it to members, and we're planning to come back to overview and scrutiny to give a more detailed feedback on the final action plan. So again, as members, you can have that input and we can take it forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely. Thank you, Dave, for wrapping that up. Members, technically that brings us to debate stage on this. Anybody want to make any further comments on this item before we move on? Nobody signalling. Lovely. So we will move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is an update report on the progress of our challenge panels. I think, generally speaking, we can probably take this as read unless there are any chairmen of those panels that would like to speak and give us a bit of a verbal update. My vice chairman, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, just for information, I had a conversation with Sue Gilbert tonight earlier on the evening, and we're proposing to have some test machines brought in for the panel to try out, and they have arrived in the building, so that we'll hope be able to implement the testing trials pretty soon, so that we'll have some more concrete information for you in the near future, hopefully. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Davis. Members, any questions on either Councillor Davis's brief report there or any other aspect of the challenge panel's reports? Again, nobody's signalling. Anybody wish to debate this item? No, in which case we can move on to our final item, which is an update on our work programme. Lorraine?
Thank you, Chairman. Just very briefly, members, the report is before you. Since publishing the report, as you'll be aware, it's been necessary to change the date of the January overview and scrutiny. So in the report, it says the 17th of January. That's now been rescheduled to the 31st of January. And as Dave mentioned a few moments ago, the peer review will come back to this committee again, either at the January or March meeting. But once we know when we've got that, we'll schedule that in. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you, Lorraine. Members, any questions, comments on the work programme? No, anybody wish to debate that item? I thought not. Well, thank you, everybody. That brings us to the end of the agenda for this evening. Of course, if I can ask everybody to remain seated for the confidential briefing that follows. But thank you very much for your time. I'll call the meeting to a close.